Good afternoon. My name is Jenny Draper. Welcome to Archives Live. I am so excited to be here at the National Archives. Thank you for joining us from hundreds of schools across the country. In this room, there are extraordinary documents from almost 500 years ago. Today, we're going to be exploring them together and stepping inside the world of a Tudor historian. Welcome to the National Archives, the place where special documents from the last 1,000 years are safely kept. This building is home to iconic documents like the Domesday Book and the passenger list from the ship the Empire Windrush. Later, we will be joined by the acclaimed Tudor historian, writer, broadcaster, and Chief Curator at Historic Royal Palaces, Dr. Tracy Borman. She has chosen 5 Tudor documents that we will explore together, including her favourite historic record. Very excitingly, you could get the chance to ask Tracy a question during our 2 live Q&As. Submit your question on Slido in the Q&A section. Use the QR code on your screen and make sure you include your school's name. But before all of that, I wanted to share with you what I got up to a few weeks ago. I was lucky enough to go behind the scenes of this unique building. Let's see what I found out. Hello and welcome to the National Archives here in Kew. My name's Jenny and I'm going to be showing you around. The first thing that you notice as you approach the building is that it looms over you like a giant concrete spaceship. This place is absolutely massive and it truly looks like it's been plonked here directly from Mars. As you go up the building, you might notice that the windows get smaller and smaller until they're almost like portholes at the top. And the walls of the building look thick and heavy, as if they're protecting something really special inside. So what are they protecting in here? Let's go find out. So now I'm in the secure archive, and what we have in front of us is rows and rows of shelves with millions of boxes on them. It's a little chillier in here than it is outside, and there is no sunlight coming in whatsoever. So who owns all these boxes? What are they for? Well, inside these boxes are millions of documents of all kinds. And if you live in England and Wales, these documents are kind of yours. They are the government archives. So they record what top people in power were doing and thinking about and deciding. And they've collected a lot of stuff over the past 1,000 years. They have a telegram that was sent by the Titanic. They have William Shakespeare's last will and testament. They have a 1,000-year-old survey of England called the Domesday Book. All sorts of things, not just bits of paper, but maps, postcards, wax seals, posters. They even have a digital archive where they collect tweets sent by 10 Downing Street. You might come and use this place for all kinds of reasons too. They have documents about kings and queens and prime ministers, but also ordinary people as well. And the really exciting thing about this archive is just how big it is. If you ran your fingers all the way down every single shelf, those poor tired fingers would walk 185 kilometres, the distance from Leeds to Birmingham. So there's so much here that one person could not possibly read it all in a lifetime. 10 people couldn't read it all in a lifetime. If you take a box off the shelf and read what's inside, you might be the first person to read that since it was written. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to take one of these boxes off the shelf and see what's inside. So I'm here with one of the boxes off the shelf. I do not know what it is that's in here. They've found me a magic box. So let's have a look at the outside. We've got like a kind of white cloth cover on the box. And if you spin it around, you can see one of the codes on the side. We have E344 here. So let's take it open, have a look inside. Oh my God. Okay, so we have one huge book taking up the entire space of this box. It looks like something you'd see in like an old fantasy movie, like a book of spells. Actually, speaking of movies, often when you see people handling old books in movies, they often wear like white gloves. And the idea with that is that you don't get the oil from your hands onto the books. However, these days, we've decided it's better to go without gloves, because although you don't get the oil on your hands, you can't feel as well when you're wearing white gloves, so you're much more likely to accidentally rip a page off. So we go no gloves, and I promise you I've washed my hands, there's no chip grease on these things. So we are going to very carefully try and get this thing out of the box. Let's pop it about there. All right, here we go. Oh my God, it's heavy. Alright, try to be very careful. It's got loads and loads of tiny little details all over it. Like someone's really decorated this thing. And we have 2 leather clasps, one on either side. So we're going to have to open these up first. Alrighty, let's open this thing. Okie dokie. So on the inside, we've got that same code again. Oh my God. Okay, so this is, I'm guessing, like an original spine for the book, or like an older spine. And then all of a sudden the pages start getting like leathery. Like that's not paper anymore, that is skin. It's like ever so slightly translucent. This is animal skin, like leather. You can really feel how much thicker that is than regular paper, and how like stiff it is. You can hear it as well. Okay, here we go. Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is all handwritten in absolutely gorgeous calligraphy. Oh my God, the person who did this really knew what they were doing. The capital letters just covered in swirls, and I think there's gold in the writing. Like some of it's gone, but like you can still see a little bit of what I think is gold there. It's not written in English, I think it's Latin. And on the second page, we've got this little picture inside the first letter of what looks to me like Henry VIII, sitting very majestic on his throne with all his ministers around him. He's got his sceptre in one hand and he's looking very magnificent. And then above him, we've got all these heraldic animals. We've got lions and dragons holding flags, and we've got the Tudor rose as well with a little crown on top. So I'm really excited to find out what this is, and that's what we're going to do next.
And here we are with this extraordinary document in all its glory. And of course, now we have Tracy Borman. Welcome.
Thank you, and hello, everybody.
So I really want to know, what is this incredible looking document?
So its official name is the Valor Ecclesiasticus, literal translation, value of the church. So you're quite right, there's Henry VIII, and this document dates to 1535. Very important year in England's history, because Henry had just taken over this new Church of England. So, of course, he wants to find out what it's worth.
Of course, yeah, you've got to know if you've given yourself a good Christmas present or not. Absolutely, and it's a massive book. Like, why did he go to all the trouble of making such a big thing?
And it's incredibly detailed. This is one of the volumes. There are 22 volumes, and he wants to know exactly what he's inherited, because traditionally the church didn't come under the king's authority, it came under the Pope's authority. But now Henry is second only to God. The Pope really isn't in the running anymore. So he has this incredibly detailed survey drawn up. And it's very exciting because it runs into so many volumes. and it hasn't ever completely been looked at and studied. So perhaps somebody out there watching today, future historian, might be the one to go through it for the first time and reveal some of its secrets.
Fantastic. So why did you choose this one as the opener?
Well, it's visually very stunning, as well as being hugely significant. We see this beautiful illumination there of Henry surrounded by his courtiers. And that's deliberate, because you might think, why bother decorating it so lavishly for pretty much a financial document? But this is Tudor propaganda. Henry wants to make his mark as head of the church.
Fantastic, and amazing to hear that it's like never been fully gone through. Like there are still secrets in this thing, so that might be a challenge for potential future historians, maybe some that are watching right now. Now you guys have been submitting your questions, so it's time for our first Q&A with Tracy Borman. So many wonderful questions coming in from schools across the country. But if you want to ask Dr. Tracy Borman a question, it's not too late. You can get in touch with yours here. Tracy, our first question comes from Austin Friars School, and they want to know, what is it about the Tudor period that made you want to specialise in this area of history?
First of all, great school to start with. Austin Friars was the home of Thomas Cromwell, who I wrote a book about. So
Tudor theme?
Absolutely Tudor theme. Now, I'm not just saying this because of the audience here today, but the person who really inspired me with Tudor history was my A-level history teacher, actually, Mrs. Jones. And she really just ignited my passion for the period. It's so dramatic. You couldn't make it up when it comes to the Tudors. You have the king who marries 6 times, the Virgin Queen. It's the age of Shakespeare and overseas exploration. I will never get tired of the period. There's always something new to discover. And as we found with that first document, there's always something new to find here at the National Archives. Such a huge collection, and new discoveries are being made all the time, even about a well-trodden period such as the Tudors.
There's just so much, isn't there? Our next question comes from Maltby Academy, and they want to know if there's any specific area of Tudor history that you think warrants investigation in the future, and why?
Gosh, these are good questions already. I think there are many. I particularly am drawn to women's history. I think that has traditionally been underrepresented. And the assumption has been, because it was a male-dominated society, that women didn't really play much of a part, particularly in government. But I found from researching Elizabeth I's reign, they absolutely did. They may not have had official roles, if you like, in government, but they still held power. And also perhaps it's time to revisit some of the less glamorous Tudor monarchs, the likes of Henry VII, the man who got it all going. I think actually he was probably one of the most successful Tudors, but we tend to kind of skip over him and go straight to his much more famous son. So I think it's time Henry VII made a comeback.
Fair enough, absolutely. From Jack and Callum in Bridlington School Sixth Form, what do you think was the most influential rebellion in this period?
Oh, Jack and Callum, that is a good one. And where do I start? Because there were quite a few rebellions, actually,
quite a lot
in this period, quite a few to choose from. I think the Pilgrimage of Grace is hard to beat, however, because this really shocked Henry VIII. I think he wasn't used to anybody opposing him. And by the time the rebellion broke out in 1536, there had been an awful lot of change already. You know, the dissolution of the monasteries was starting, the Reformation was in full flow. And I think Henry had believed his own publicity. It was all going marvellously well. Nobody was opposing him. They all agreed. And then this was a bit of a shock to the system. And I think he had to realize that, yeah, he's got to listen to his people. And those about him started to get worried as well, notably Thomas Cromwell.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they've changed so much, absolutely. Charlie from Thorpe Academy would like to know what you recommend as the best pathway into becoming a historian.
Ah, Charlie, so I get asked this an awful lot, and there isn't just one path, I would stress that. So don't put too much pressure on yourself. Of course, I would say study history for as long as you can. So ideally, you know, study it at university. You might consider doing a postgraduate degree, but it's not essential. the sooner you get experience. So if you want to be a historian, then just get researching, get in the archives, work with documents, write, and get your writing out there. And it's never been easier to do that. So when I was starting out back in the Dark Ages, the internet wasn't really so much of a thing. So if you wanted to get published, you had to write for magazines and the like. But now you can write blogs, you can tweet, you can make TikTok videos, whatever it is you do, just to get your work out there.
Fantastic. And last question is from Hardenhuish School. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. And they want to know if you think Mary I has been given a fair reputation in history.
Okay, I've had a bit of criticism personally for this because I've written a lot about Elizabeth and how she benefited in a way from her sister's mistakes. And I think Mary has been seen as the one who had a disastrous reign, and then Elizabeth learned from that. But to give Mary more credit, she was a trailblazer. There hadn't been all that many queens of England before, queen's consort,
yeah,
yes.
Ruling in her own right.
But ruling in her own right. So she had the hard work to do in a way, and paved the way for her half-sister. She's, of course, called Bloody Mary because of the burning of the Protestant heretics that she ordered. But she wasn't the bloodiest Tudor. So I think it's about time we started to look afresh at Mary I.
Well, thank you so much for all your insights, Tracy. We are now going to explore two more of your chosen documents. So please tell me about what we can see on this one.
So this one is a letter by Henry VIII's precious jewel, as he called him, his only son, Edward VI. And you can see here at the top, it says, by the king. That's actually the Victorians who wrote that when they were cataloguing.
That's been added later.
Yes, exactly. A bit of Victorian vandalism there on the document. But you can see Edward's quite childish signature right at the top.
Yeah, you're right. It really does look like he's really tried. Bless
Yes.
him. Like he's tried to get that very, very neat in a way that like, children often do when they're first sort of starting to join up their letters.
Absolutely.
It's a little bit laboured.
And he's only just turned 12 years old.
Okay.
So when he writes this, and he's writing it, by the way, on Christmas Day,
Oh.
1549. He's not busy opening his Christmas presents. And this is a letter from Edward to his bishops.
Okay.
And really, it's ordering them to make sure that this new prayer book of his, which is very Protestant in tone, is fully implemented. There's recently been the prayer book rebellion, also known as the Western Rising, which is opposing all of these religious changes that the young king is bringing in. But Edward, rather than bowing to that rebellion, is saying, no, you need to double down on it and make sure that my new prayer book takes root.
Oh, so he's cracking the whip.
100%.
And there's a mention of a duke in this letter, isn't there? Can you tell
Yes.
me a bit more about him?
So the Duke is Edward Seymour, Duke of Somerset. So he is Edward's uncle, and he was Lord Protector from the beginning of Edward's reign, because Edward was only 9 years old when he became king, couldn't rule in his own right. So his uncle did it for him. But really the prayer book rebellion was the end for the Duke of Somerset, because it was seen as a huge failing of his government. So he was out, and there was going to be a new regime.
Fantastic. And the idea of Edward sort of cracking the whip, it goes against what we often think about him as a king, right? Because we often hear about him as a young boy who was very sick and then just died very young. But this seems to go against that.
I'm so pleased you mentioned that, because it's one of the biggest myths, and I hear it a lot, that Edward was sickly all the time. He wasn't. There was nothing wrong with him until about the last year of his life, and then he got ill. But until then, he was quite a force to be reckoned with. I think he was a mini tyrant. He probably would have been a bigger tyrant than his father, Henry VIII, had he lived longer. Even as a 12-year-old, he has very decided opinions. He has authority. He wants to make his mark as king.
Fantastic. Yeah, when he writes this, he doesn't know he's going to die young.
Yes.
Amazing. And then the next document you've got for us is really visual, isn't it? Can you
Yes.
explain who these people are?
So here we have Edward's elder half-sister, Mary, she's on the right there, and she's with her husband, Philip of Spain. This is a plea roll, so it's a legal document. And as if we're in any doubt who these people are, we have their initials at the top there. We have MR for Mary Regina, or Mary the Queen, and PR for Philip Rex, Philip the King.
And they look really similar, don't they? They've come out in matching his and hers bathrobes. Why have they chosen to wear the same thing?
Well, that's very deliberate, because Mary really married Philip against the wishes of pretty much everybody. Her government, her people. They didn't want this Spanish marriage, as they called it. They thought England would be dominated by Spain. But Mary was determined that her husband would be pretty much a joint monarch. So even though Parliament had ordered that Philip was very much a subordinate to Mary, not in Mary's eyes. So it's very deliberate that it's almost like a spot the difference here between husband and wife.
Image almost.
Absolutely equal regal authority. But this is what I think we might call today fake news. This is the image that Mary wanted to project. But this was made in the year 1558, so right at the end of her reign. Things had gone badly wrong. Philip wasn't the joint monarch by any means. He was an absentee monarch, spent most of their marriage abroad. The marriage had failed to produce an heir. It had done nothing but cause deep-seated opposition to Mary.
Oh, wow. So this isn't even a picture of a real event. He wasn't even there in the country.
No.
That's incredible. Well, thank you so much. You can get so much insight into the period from just tiny little pieces of documents like this. Now we're going to have a go at reading some tricky Tudor handwriting. So, Tracy, a question I've really wanted to ask you is, what do you think the biggest challenge is when it comes to reading Tudor documents?
By far the biggest challenge, and one that really shocked me when I first looked at my very first original document, was just how hard it is to read Tudor handwriting.
Oh no, yeah, it can come up like a bit of a mess of squiggles, right?
It really, let's just say it's changed a bit. And of course, we live in an age where a lot of the writing that we read is on a screen. So it's very easy, it's standardized. Not so in the Tudor period. It's pretty much like code breaking. We call it palaeography, reading old handwriting, deciphering old handwriting. But it's such an important skill for any Tudor historian or any historian, really full stop. But it's so rewarding because when you do learn the skills involved and the little tricks of the trade, then these whole worlds open up in front of you, and it's tremendously exciting.
Oh, fantastic. Well, now we are going to get a bit of an insight into being a Tudor historian with our own palaeography challenge. Reading difficult handwriting is something I'm sure a lot of you will have experience with, especially the teachers in the audience. And this document doesn't make it very easy, does it, Tracy?
No. So this document dates from September 1578, and it was written by Sir Francis Walsingham, Principal Secretary, Spy Master to Elizabeth I. He really kept her alive amidst all these Catholic plots and conspiracies. Well, it's a draft, actually, in his own hand, of a letter that he wrote to Lord Burleigh, Elizabeth's chief advisor. They tended to make drafts and keep those and then send out the original. Thank goodness.
Okay. Yeah.
This means we've still got them.
Absolutely.
But you can probably see there are crossings out. It's a bit untidy, which makes it all the more challenging to read.
So who's he sending this to and why?
So he's sending it to his partner in crime, if you like, Lord Burleigh. So the two work hand in glove in Elizabeth's government. And it's about the hottest topic of the day, which is, will Elizabeth I get married? Of course, she's the Virgin Queen, but there is a proposal for her to marry the Duke of Anjou, brother of the French King Henry III.
Fantastic. So we're going to find out what Walsingham thinks about this marriage. Now it is your chance to take part and decipher some Tudor phrases from the document. If you have the resource pack printed, you can open it to page 13, or you can just look on the screen. Submit your answers to Challenge 1 on Slido using the poll function. Now we are going to start you off with a slightly easier activity. So choose the option you think is correct. You have 1 minute for the first challenge. And your time starts now. And your time is up. I have to say, I love the idea that Walsingham might be writing about a giant grouse in relation to this marriage. I suspect that's not the right answer. We're just getting the results in for the first challenge, and it looks like 90% of you have got the correct answer. The right phrase is great grief. Now, this time we're going to step up the challenge a little bit, but we have provided a few tips for reading some tricky letters, and we have given you the odd word. This time, you have 2 minutes to work out what our phrases say. You can write your answer in Slido, or you can discuss in your classroom. Good luck. And your time is up. Well done for deciphering this 500-year-old handwriting. We've got the phrases coming up. The H's were really strange, right? So his two phrases are alienation of these people's hearts and dangerous and unsound counsel. Tracy, I think that gives you an idea of what he thought about this marriage.
Yes, which is not much, really. So Walsingham is against this marriage. His worry is that the Duke of Anjou may well become King of France because Henry III as yet doesn't have any children. And the problem with that is if he's both King of England and King of France, Walsingham thinks that England will be completely dominated by France, just as it was by Spain, arguably during Mary's reign. And Walsingham is much more in favour of alliance with the Netherlands, who have rebelled against Spain. But it's such a delicate power balance in Europe, and that's what Walsingham is really trying to maintain. He thinks that marriage will just disrupt the whole thing.
Amazing. Well, the full document is included in your resource pack, so you can explore this more in your classroom. Alrighty, we've now got some more of your fantastic questions coming up. So, Tracy, our first question comes from King's Priory School, and they would like to know, what are some of the biggest myths or misconceptions that you hear about the Tudor period?
Oh, some of the biggest myths. Well, I work for part of the time at Hampton Court, and I hear a lot about health and hygiene. And so probably that comes out fairly near the top. For example, that everybody smelt. Let's be a bit horrible histories about this. In fact, they didn't. They tended to wash their linen underclothes more than they washed their bodies, but that actually was quite effective at keeping yourself smelling quite fragrant. The other one is that nobody drank fresh water and that they all just had to drink wine because water wasn't safe. They were drinking fresh water by the gallon. So that's another myth. I suppose bigger myths. Mary, Queen of Scots, great tragic heroine. I think she was really a bit of a disappointment as queen. Made lots of terrible mistakes. And also I think we've been quite misogynistic, if I can say that, in looking at the Tudor queens. Mary is often dismissed just as Bloody Mary. We obsess about whether Elizabeth was really the Virgin Queen, and we don't consider them as queens in their own right.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're really interested in whether or not Elizabeth actually did it or not, aren't we?
We are.
We have another question from the Weald School. They loved your podcast on not just the Tudors, about Anne Boleyn and Elizabeth I, podcast episode. What would you say is the most interesting insight into their relationship?
Oh, it's almost as if I planted this question because it's my new book is about Anne Boleyn and her daughter Elizabeth I.
Is your agent in the audience today?
Exactly, yeah, just planted that. Thank you very much. So I think there are so many. I think really just the fact they had a relationship, because the assumption has been Elizabeth was less than 3 when Anne was executed. So she hardly knew her mother, so therefore end of relationship. But actually, it was only the beginning. And Elizabeth was profoundly affected by her mother's execution, but also her mother's example. Anne Boleyn was a force to be reckoned with in the Tudor court, and Elizabeth learned from that and spent the rest of her long life and reign trying to honour her mother. I particularly loved going through the National Archives, and I think what really was for me the most poignant moment, I found an account book of Anne Boleyn, and the very last thing she spent money on just before her execution was items of clothing for her daughter Elizabeth. So it's such a personal document that really speaks volumes for that mother-daughter bond.
That's amazing. Yeah, you start to think about what you would spend money on if you knew you weren't going to have any more time.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. We have another question from Hardenhuish School. I've got no better at pronouncing it, I'm afraid. And they want to know, if Elizabeth had married, who do you think would have been the best suitor for England and why? They've tipped their hand on this one. They like Eric of Sweden.
Oh, Eric of Sweden. We tend to gloss over him. He was one of the early candidates. I think actually, politically speaking, he would have upset the fewest people, I think, because, Sweden was not such a superpower, really. She couldn't really have married anyone from France or Spain without causing real upset, because they're the 2 dominant powers.
You agree with Walsingham on that one?
I think so. I do agree with Walsingham. And it would have been difficult for her to marry one of her own subjects. Robert Dudley was the lead contender there, but that would have been divisive. You know what? I agree. I think probably if she was going to go for anyone, Eric of Sweden. But it was Elizabeth's masterstroke, choosing not to marry at all. As she famously declared, I will have but one mistress here and no master. And I think that was the key to her success. And it's probably why we're still celebrating her 400 years later.
Fantastic. There we go. Eric of Sweden stands. One last question from Hector from Fortismere School. What would you say is the most overlooked event in Tudor history in terms of its impact?
Oh, Hector, what a great...
Big, wide-ranging question.
Yes. I think there are quite a few, because we tend to focus on big personalities. So Henry VIII takes up a lot of space, and we talk a lot about him and Elizabeth I, and we overlook the sort of shadowy, more shadowy personalities such as Henry VII and the sort of the mid-Tudors, if you like, Mary and Edward. But I think one of the things we perhaps should focus more on is the end of the Tudor period, because we tend to see it as a foregone conclusion. It's the end of the Tudors and then the rise of the Stuarts. Well, it did happen like that and quite smoothly, but it could so easily have descended into civil war. It could have been one of the most turbulent times, and it was quite a lucky escape that it ended up as a peaceful succession. I think we ought to look at that more.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your insights and your wonderful answers.
Pleasure.
We have time to look at one more document. Okay, now it is time for the grand finale. Tracy is going to be unboxing her favourite document at the National Archives. Now, helping us out, you might see Alice, who works at the education team in the National Archives, just to help us out with handling this record. Now, I don't know what you've chosen, so I am genuinely excited to find out. What do we have?
Okay, I can tell you my hands are genuinely shaking now because this is my favourite document. I'm just going to turn it on its side so you can see there the document reference, which is SP for State Papers. I spend a lot of time with the State Papers, and I have seen this document many times, but can I just say it gets me every single time. Beautifully bound.
It's lovely, yeah, gorgeous deep red colour.
Deep red colour. So here we are in the State Papers of Elizabeth I. And what we're looking at here is a letter from her greatest favourite, Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester. They knew each other. They were close for 50 years. And this is a letter he wrote in August 1588.
Okay, so this is towards the end of his life. What was going on in 1588?
So you may have heard of this year. I hope you have, because it's the year of the Armada. And in fact, the Armada had just been defeated and Robert Dudley had played a part in that. But he's not very well. He's at the very end of his life, and he's gone to Rycote, which is a house that both he and Elizabeth had stayed in before she became queen. So it was special to them both. And from there at Rycote, he writes to Elizabeth. And I have to say, it's a pretty routine letter. He's sort of inquiring after Elizabeth's health and thanking her for some medicine that she sent him. But what gives me shivers down the spine are 3 words written on the reverse, and that's why it's my favourite. So I'm going to ask Alice if you wouldn't mind turning it round, because I can feel my heart rate start to increase in the anticipation of just seeing this yet again.
We don't want shaky hands with this thing.
We don't want shaky hands with this. So I'm going to turn it over, and we can see there, look, Robert Dudley's signature. Robert Leicester, he calls himself Your Majesty's most faithful and obedient servant. That's not it. These 3 words, these are in the Queen's handwriting, and she has inscribed it his last letter, because Robert Dudley died just a few days later. And Elizabeth's heartbreak really is shown in this inscription, and she kept this letter in a locked casket by her bed for the rest of her life.
Amazing. She knows that's going to be the last thing she ever gets from him, and so she's written it down. That's so gorgeous. Thank you so much for showing it to us.
Pleasure.
Well, that brings us to the end of Archives Live, The Tudors. A huge thank you to Tracy for your extraordinary insights and giving us a glimpse into the world of a Tudor historian. Thank you for watching along in your classrooms. You can continue exploring these documents in your resource pack, and make sure you check out the huge range of documents available on the National Archives education website. Share your experiences of today on social media using the hashtag #ArchivesLive, and look out for more Archives Live events coming up. So that's goodbye from Tracy.
Goodbye, and thank you for joining us.
And goodbye from me. Goodbye.